Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sustainable Finance Podcast. My name is Paul Ellis, and I'm your host for these programs about developments in this fast-growing industry. The story of Salish Elements began when one man gifted a bundle of tobacco to another. Rueben George and Omar Kassem first met at a gathering designed to provide indigenous communities with the support of technology and business activists. Omar is an energy industry engineer working towards safely deploying hydrogen into British Columbia's utility infrastructure. Rueben is a globally recognized environmentalist and best-selling co-author of It Stops Here, the story of the spiritual, cultural, and political resurgence of an indigenous nation taking action to reclaim its lands, waters, and food systems in the face of colonization. The gift of tobacco, from Omar to Rueben, led to discussions of how a green hydrogen energy business could provide an alternative to oil, as well as share an economic opportunity with other indigenous communities and First Nations in Canada. The idea of producing green hydrogen across British Columbia with other indigenous communities has become the story of Salish Elements, which Omar and Rueben have graciously agreed to share with our followers today. Hello, Omar and Rueben, and welcome to the Sustainable Finance Podcast.
Hey, good morning.
Morning, thank you.
It's great to have you as our guest today, and we're really excited about the opportunity to discuss what you're doing in British Columbia. So I'm going to start with a question for Omar, and Rueben, you can jump in as well if you get an impulse. How is Salish Elements growing and scaling the green hydrogen market in British Columbia, Omar?
Thanks. So Salish Elements, we're an Indigenous-owned green hydrogen development company, and our model is to partner with First Nations in a majority ownership with First Nations communities to scale and grow a green hydrogen production at a low cost. So one of the barriers to adoption when it comes to green hydrogen, as many probably know, if they've been in the industry, that it's the cost of fuel, the cost of green hydrogen. And through our partnerships with First Nations, we're able to accomplish a more cost-effective green hydrogen fuel, but also help in de-risking and managing sort of the risks and barriers that come with green hydrogen projects, which we can touch on later on. And our goal is to build that green hydrogen network across British Columbia, not just with production, but also with trucks, with transportation vehicles, marine vessels, fueling stations all across the province, but also expanding into the Pacific Northwest region of the U.S. And Rueben, do you want to add a little bit more to that?
Sure. So we're also looking at, you mentioned a little bit, alluded to it, is the fueling stations from Vancouver to the northern British Columbia, and also many of the communities past Terrace, BC, which is probably 2/3 the length of the province here. Everything past Terrace is on diesel, and we've been working with communities and First Nation, non-First Nations to switch them over from diesel to hydrogen. And some of the remote islands too. And you mentioned the Pacific Northwest. They're very interested, and we're working with them to purchase our hydrogen. But we had a meeting with them to expand there as well, to duplicate what we're doing here in BC, but to do it also down there, starting in Washington State. But there's I-90 that of course goes right to your area, to New York, and then there's I-5 that goes south, and we've been in heavy discussions about that. And the same idea too is working with the tribes down in the U.S., like we're working with the First Nations up here.
Terrific. So go ahead, Omar. Sorry.
Yeah. So one of the key things for us when it comes to like developing and growing the market is our approach. So our approach, typically any approach with renewables or clean fuels by any big corporation is suppressing the carbon molecule or capturing the carbon molecule, eliminating it somehow, Whereas in our development approach, we're taking a more holistic view. So we look at the climate issue not just as a carbon issue, but more of a socioeconomic issue rooted in overdevelopment of resources, or the development of resources without communities being involved in the process, whether they're Indigenous or non-Indigenous communities. So what we're approaching this, and I think is going to be a key to our success, is that we're really bringing community ownership and involvement to the forefront of the future of clean energy development. So when we're developing green hydrogen, or in developing these new fuels and the future fuels, we're really trying to bring communities into the ownership and into the fold of that development, so that we are also not just addressing the climate issues, but addressing kind of the root of these, some of these socioeconomic issues that prevent resource development in Canada and likely in the US as well. So that is I think going to be a key to our success, and that provides a big social license for us to do that, green hydrogen and all that development with the government, but also with First Nations communities and tribes and local communities that typically wouldn't support these types of developments. So really we're really not trying to greenwash or add, say, oh, we're doing something green, but then also damaging the environment or damaging communities in other ways. We're really trying to stick to doing the right thing and changing the way business is done, so that it is more fair and equitable to the people, to the land, and to the waters, right? And without really compromising profit. This is not a non-profit. We're doing this to bring opportunities and bring economic opportunities and revenue for our shareholders, but also for the people too. So that is how we really, from a strategic standpoint, how we plan to scale and grow our business model around green hydrogen.
Well, thanks, Rueben, for that information about the tribes and other First Nations. And Omar, can you give our followers some idea of Salish Elements' short and long-term financial and market goals?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're reaching really close to our final investment decision on our flagship project. It's a 25 megawatt, 10 tons per day of green hydrogen production project. We've spent the last 2 years on that. That's a $130 million project. We're looking about to raise $20 million in equity, and we're in the last final stages now of doing that. And also we're looking to then scale that. So we have 100 megawatts available on the same location. And so we're looking for like-minded investors that share our values that we just mentioned to partner with us. But also even on the fueling stations and on the hydrogen transportation side, there's lots more opportunities and lots more opportunities for a return on investment. So and equity. So we're looking primarily for equity investors that would support us with that initial growth, but also when we scale into future opportunities.
That's fantastic. I'm glad that you've mentioned all of this, Omar, because the next question I'm going to ask Rueben to answer first, and that is, how do you incorporate your Indigenous culture into the work of Salish Elements?
I think it's I know it's no different from any other work that I did, and I'm a therapist, but I haven't practiced for about 15 years. But my grandfather was Chieftain George. He was a poet, a writer, an actor, and he said, anything you learn in college or university about healing, there's a native teaching that says the same thing. So I did that. I hired 2 psychologists and 10 elders, and we translated psychological models to native legends and stories and teachings. Around the environmental work that I did, stopping a TMX pipeline, we did a 1,200-page assessment, a spill analysis, a clean analysis. We did multiple economic studies. We did air quality tests. We did water testing, and the results were fantastic and new. But it was all based on Tsleil-Waututh Nation law, our law, and our law primary is truth, health, family, and culture. And then the fundamental teachings of humanity, of love and honor and respect, dignity, pride, all those important things are our values also in the work that we do. So we incorporate that into what we're doing. And Omar mentioned that, First Nation tribes typically wouldn't get into this type of business, but it's the fossil fuel business that they wouldn't get into, and because a lot of the business people that we're working with are thriving in their businesses, and what they're doing then are with the same idea of working within their Indigenous law. Hatlip First Nation is exactly like that. They said no more logging in their traditional territory, which is hundreds and thousands of miles, and they said they are going to protect their water and protect their salmon and do a whole bunch of things like that. And that's the same with us here in Tsleil-Waututh Nation, where I am from. When you come into economic success, the work that they did is phenomenal. The inlet right in front of me is, has 700 different foreign chemicals in it. The community's been cleaning it to the degree the first time in 55 years they did a clam harvest. Been hand tying eelgrass along the shores here, that the eelgrass is abundant and brought in herring. First time in my life a gray whale came and ate the herring. Sea lions have come in. Our salmon count for our main river went down to 6,000 for the whole year. In one day last year, we had over 1 million salmon in the river at once. And reintroduced elk into the territory, brought back grizzly bears, wolves, and started completing that ecosystem by reintroducing something that belonged there. So that's the kind of partnerships that we have with nations that are and tribes that think the same way, not only to protect the land, but enhance it. The salmon, that's a big thing about Hatlip. They've been enhancing the salmon, protecting the salmon, helping it to grow. And the same with our partners up along the coast of British Columbia, but also going south. These are very, very important things that we see in partnership that how we want to move forward, because of course it's a no-brainer. And for all First Nations, when they see the model and see the success that we could create, see the economics that we could create, but also how it changes things, and it's much easier to work for something than against something. So every partner that we approach to agree to work with us around First Nation communities and tribes, and we want to continue with that success and make sure that we do what we can to protect what we love, and because it's so beautiful here. Vancouver's been consistently voted one of the most livable places in the world, and it's because of the beauty and of course, my people are from here, so we always been here, and we're always going to be here. So let's keep it beautiful that way. And resurgence for sure one of the ways to make sure that we do that. I'm pretty excited about this, and it fits right in with our morals and values of our culture and our spirituality.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like both of you have a significant background, knowledge, and experience in what came together when you met and you started developing your partnership as Salish Elements. Now, tell us a little bit about that initial meeting and vision and sharing of ideas and your initial dialogue between the two of you.
Go ahead, Omar.
Yeah, I met actually Rueben through some of the pipeline resistance that was happening here in British Columbia. So I actually worked for a company that is involved in pipelines. But I was actually working on their green portfolio, and then I decided, okay, well, I'm not really, resistance is typically not a big part of my portfolio, but it was a time my spirit, my heart really wanted me to kind of be involved in that, and that's how I met Rueben. So it was sort of how it was meant to be. And through that, at the time I was developing those business plans around green hydrogen, and there was something deep in my heart that was saying, hey, this vision needs to be done with First Nations here in BC to be successful. This is the way to do it. That's the future. So and I didn't actually know any First Nations or anybody at the time, but that's kind of how I eventually met Rueben, was through that work around pipelines. And so I had those business plans developed, and we kind of went through it together, and we figured out, okay, this might be a pretty good opportunity that we develop these new resources for the benefit of First Nations to really bring and like I mentioned earlier, is to bring that future into the ownership of local communities and for the benefit of local communities. I mean, we see a lot of times big corporations with shareholders taking most of the benefit and the economic benefit of resource development. This is not what we're proposing here. We're proposing a bit of a different model, but it's actually a model that you see in other areas too in the world, like in Norway, where the government or 51% of all their oil and gas and bring that back into their communities and to their people. In Saudi Arabia as well and other countries, but here in Canada, it's not so much. We kind of leave that for the big corporations to take maximum benefit from, and then we suffer with affordability issues or housing issues and that kind of thing. So when we're really developing that business model for the future of green fuels and the green economy with First Nations, it's really bringing that concept into the fold of what we develop, right? So we're making sure that the wealth and the abundance of our land stays with our communities and our people as much as possible. So yeah, that's kind of, obviously maintaining the benefit of our shareholders as well. But really, we're taking those business models outside that we see in the globe and incorporating here in Canada. So that was kind of some of the visioning that we had on sort of the financial and how that will all work.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything to add, Rueben?
Yeah, how industry has been is brutal here. Canada has the lowest taxes against fossil fuel companies in the world, and so not much does come back to the communities and develop, and also they have some of the high subsidies. There's billions of dollars poured into fossil fuels, and so it is a challenge in the market where the protection from fossil fuels for here isn't as high. Like we saw in Norway was they enhance everything we have, and for us we already do that. Like I mentioned, all the stewardship land that we have done, and nations continue to do is good. So yeah, this exactly fits with what we're doing and going in the direction of being green, and that's so important.
That's great. Well, listen, Salish Elements, like any business infrastructure, must balance risk and innovation for its investors. So can you give us and our followers an example of risk that you've taken that has paid off, and how you've dealt with the need to innovate in the work in your geographical area in order to keep your investors happy and keep moving the cash flow through the business to keep it growing? How has that been working?
Yeah, so a lot of what we're doing is so we're doing with the green hydrogen. Automatically, you get into technological innovation, but with sort of the business model that we talked about just earlier. Well, there's business model innovation, right? And that involves a little bit of risk as well. And working with First Nations on a green hydrogen project, there hasn't been many companies that have tried to do that yet. And but that was key. Really, like when we actually started. Our timing was when the hydrogen industry was kind of hitting a bit of a downturn, and there wasn't as much investment into the green hydrogen businesses. We saw like the big investments coming in 2020 and 2021, but we kind of started a bit after that. But actually, our investors were really interested in the partnership with First Nations, and they saw that as a huge opportunity. So, that kind of paid off in our initial growth in getting seed funding and financing. Is that partnership with First Nations was key, right? And then it's also going to be key to when it comes to actual like project execution. So, where we're connecting our power supply, where we're developing land, we're developing water. There's a lot less permitting required because it's on reserve land. The government's significantly less involved And also we have access to power that typically no other developer or no other mini business would have access to. And it's really hard to get low cost green power to then be able to produce green hydrogen from. So from an opportunity standpoint, that really paid off. Working with First Nations on reserve to develop a project has been paid off. Then now we can actually produce green hydrogen at a cost that completely disrupts the market, which is in many states in the U.S. they don't have a green grid, or they're developing wind and solar and all that will take years. So we were able to, through a strategic partnership with the First Nations, really compress that project timeline. So we're able to come in quickly with a green hydrogen project and access a low cost of power to produce a low cost of green hydrogen, a low cost of water. But the thing is, those benefits come back to the community. So the project is 51% owned by the community. So that's the trade-off, right? 51% of these projects will come back to the local community for their benefit. And then the rest will come to Salish and its shareholders. So it's still a very net benefit, considering that we will be disrupting the market, and we already have in a lot of ways. Another thing around risk as well is, when you talk about green hydrogen, there's the equity side, and then there's on the debt side, and so investors and equity investors, they typically look at opportunities, and we bring a lot of opportunities. But when we start talking with banks, we start talking with these sort of financial institutions that are on the debt side, they take a different lens. They see, risk, and how do we minimize risk? We don't want to lose money, right? So that's where actually working with First Nations again is extremely helpful, especially for projects like this. So right now, the Canadian government has $10 billion in loan guarantees specifically for Indigenous-owned projects. So that 51% Indigenous ownership will qualify this project for an Indigenous loan guarantee. So that for banks that haven't really been involved in green hydrogen is sort of viewed as a risk. It hasn't been tried and true for hundreds of years, like oil and gas. Having that loan guarantee is kind of that thing that will like push the project over the edge and actually get it to execution and scaling, right? So that is sort of again the balance between risk and opportunities in developing a First Nations owned green hydrogen project. There's lots of opportunities. These opportunities come with risks, but these risks can be mitigated through specifically programs that are designed to advance the Indigenous owned projects here in Canada.
That's great. Listen, we've already talked about the benefits for other tribes and First Nations in Canada. Rueben, is there anything more that you wanted to add about what's happening in your partnerships with these other tribes? Can you tell our followers where that's happening and what other tribes and First Nations are engaging with you, and both financially and from a long-term strategy perspective?
Yeah, sure. I'll answer that, but I'm going to add a little bit to Omar. So,
sure.
The benefit also with First Nations, our communities is there's something called the Chilcotin decision that happened in Canada, where you live on the land, you own the land. So what it ended up doing is creating our traditional territory, what we already have, but having it been recognized by Canada and the provinces. So our reserve is actually only a couple squared miles, but our traditional territory is couple thousand square miles, and it encompasses all Vancouver. So we have our laws around how businesses need to conduct themselves in our traditional territory. For example, any development in our traditional territory needed to Tsleil-Waututh Nation permit to move forward with a project. And so we deal with over 500 projects a year where people need a Tsleil-Waututh Nation permit. So that brings a lot of leverage for nations in British Columbia, and also in negotiations with government or with other businesses that are going to benefit Salish Elements. But your question is our partnerships in the landscape, and it's most of it's strategic too. We worked with a a trucking company, and also Simon Fraser University, and some of the data that they collected for us, and of course some of our engineers and Omar himself looked at strategically where the best places would be to put filling stations for trucks to fill up between Vancouver and British Columbia. Then we mapped that out. Then we looked at the local First Nations, and a lot of First Nations and tribes have gas stations and mini malls and a lot of things already established around the routes of main highways. So it was easy for us to pick. So the filling stations are strategically picked, like I was saying, and also in the tribes it's the same thing. But more importantly too, it's like-minded nations and people. Our partnerships with a nation in Washington State, Tsleil-Waututh Nation, for example, has a long history of working down there with them that goes decades and generations, and so they're the perfect partner down there to start in Washington State. We're about to sign a purchase agreement, and we turn that purchase and agreement into asking them to work with us to duplicate what they're doing. And also with the tribes and First Nations, we do propose and say we want to use your land, and also up to under for sure 5 acres, and 1 acre for some of the filling stations, and what we say is we'll get the funds, we'll do the work, we just use your land and you benefit. But what also ends up happening is they like the project so much that everybody gets involved. They want to be involved. The community wants to be involved. When we went to the community and presented to Hadlip, they're very excited and looking forward to the training that's going to come about and jobs that's it's going to create. And so, everybody wants to be involved when they hear it, and especially when they start to understand that how green energy works, how hydrogen works. The communities get involved in the development of it, creating the site, what the site should look like, how it should fit their own culture specifically. We say First Nations here in Canada because we're first people here, but we're many, many different nations and many, many different cultural approaches that need to happen to retrofit the work that we're doing to fit that community, from the design of the facility to sustainability to protection of the environment. It's different issues that people are looking at that we want to make sure we fit and that they're involved in that process.
Terrific. Well, listen, thank you both very much, Omar and Rueben. And we want to tell our Sustainable Finance Podcast followers, especially those folks involved in sustainable investment, where they can go online to get more information about Salish Elements and how they can get in touch with you, either both of you or you individually, with questions about the issues that we've discussed in today's episode. Can you give us that information to share with other folks?
Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. We have there's some information on our website. It's www.salishelements.ca, and you'll find some information there. And there's a way to contact us through that website. But if people want to get in contact with me directly, that'll be probably easier. So my email is pretty simple. It's omar@salishelements.ca.
And if you have any reports or annual reviews of the work or anything that you can provide us that we can attach to this program, because we have the ability to do that so that people can dig deeper into your past experience and your successes so far with their own time, and study it the way that they want to if they were going into school or making an investment with you. So if you have any documents like that you can share with us, we'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Rueben, anything you wanted to add before we sign off?
No, I'm really thankful, and we're excited about our work. We're excited about expanding. We also working with the nation here right in Vancouver. We're in negotiations with Tsleil-Waututh Nation to work with the Port of Vancouver, and so we're excited about that. And not only the work that we're doing here in British Columbia, Washington State, but expanding beyond that. We want to go across the provinces. I was just in a conference in Edmonton, and there's a lot of eager want to participate. And we were and the international partnerships that we were creating. We were just in last couple of weeks in Norway, Germany, and Scotland, and there's tons of partnerships that we are creating there that we're going to move forward, and it's something that's needed more than any other time in human history. Do we need something like this? In British Columbia alone, there's over 1,000 major forest fires. There's flooding and a whole bunch of crazy things that are happening with climate change. This is what we need, and for our investors, our margins are really good, and there's a lot of benefit to partnering with us, and this is what we need, and we're excited about moving forward with this and creating more partnerships and making our company not just a regional company, but moving towards a global company as well.
Terrific. Well, thank you both very much, Omar Kassem and Rueben George of Salish Elements. And our followers can join us again next week for another episode. My name is Paul Ellis. I'm your host, and this is the Sustainable Finance Podcast.